I was in the midst of doing some studying the other day, and I ran across this phrase that kind of made me pause. I mean, it was a phrase that I was familiar with, but I wanted to see exactly what the definition was. So, I Googled what this phrase might mean, and this was the definition I found. Now, the phrase I was looking up was guiding principles. The definition of a guiding principle was this: a guiding principle is a fundamental belief or value that acts as a core foundation for decision making and behavior. It's a part of our fundamental belief, a core value that helps our decision making and our behavior. That's a guiding principle. So, in other words, basically what a guiding principle is this guiding light, is this idea that guides much of what we do. Well, that caused me to wonder. I wondered, what is the guiding principle of things like my community? What is the guiding principle of the community I live in? What is the guiding light? What is the intent? The guiding principle. What is the guiding principle for my country? This country I live in. What is our guiding principle? What guides our decisions? What guides our behavior as a country? What are the guiding principles of my church? What are the things that drive us forward? What is it that informs our decision making as a church? Well, as I thought about those things, I thought, it's hard sometimes for us to have control over organizations or over things like our community and our culture. I mean, how we vote might help. What we do in terms of where we shop, that might be something that might help with the guiding principles, or help move the guiding principles in the direction that we want. But really, when it comes down to it, it doesn't necessarily change things. I mean, some of that can be debated, but those guiding principles might guide things like where I shop, or how I vote, or what news I listen to or don't listen to. But really, when it comes down to it, those kinds of guiding principles we can't always control. But what we can control is our own personal guiding principles. And in turn, those guiding principles that we hold within ourselves may help transform some of those other places, like our church, our community, our country. If enough of us have attuned to the guiding principles that we see in Scripture, and we begin to truly live by those guiding principles, then perhaps we can get a wave of change and movement in the world. And so really, our personal guiding principles are what needs to drive us. And then we need to begin to see what happens in the larger scale as things go. So, as I was thinking about this guiding principles idea, I remembered this passage of scripture from Matthew 18. And there's this section in Matthew 18 where Jesus has just been teaching his disciples about the guiding principle of forgiveness. Now, really, what's behind that guiding principle for Jesus is what's important. But what happens is, as he's talking about this guiding principle of forgiveness, Peter, one of the disciples, interrupts Jesus. And he says, "Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive?" So you see, Peter is looking at this as we often look at these things. And we begin to say, okay, forgiveness, yeah, that's a great thing. I want to forgive people, too, and I want to be forgiven too. But how does that inform everything that I'm doing? And what if someone is right there in my community, right there a part of the church, and continues to do things wrong? How long should I forgive that person? Seems like a good question. Well, Jesus says, so Peter goes on and he says, should I forgive them 7 times? And Jesus says to him, not 7 times, but 77 times. Now, here's the thing. The guiding principle isn't just forgiveness. In fact, that's not the guiding principle. The guiding principle is why forgiveness needs to be a part of your life. I think the more I read the scripture and the more I hear Jesus talking about things like forgiveness and loving your neighbor and caring for those who have been hurt and marginalized, caring for those who are put out, opening your table up in hospitality. The more I hear Jesus talk about those kinds of things, what I think the guiding principle is this. It's about reconciliation. It is about relational care for one another. That's why we forgive. That's why we love those who may do harm to us. Love our enemies. That's why we invite people into our community so that no one feels like they are on the outside, because really the guiding principle for Jesus was restoration. It was about healing broken relationships. In fact, that's why Jesus came. That's why God sent his only Son into the world, so that the fractured relationship could be reconciled, that the broken relationship that we have with our God can be reconciled. It is that guiding principle that informed just about everything Jesus said. I came into this world, he said, not to condemn the world, but so that the world might have life. You see, that's the guiding principle that is behind everything that Jesus did. And you know what? I think we quickly forget that. You know, we want to talk about things like, well, how often do I have to forgive? And, you know, how far can I go in certain things and still get away with it? That is not a good, healthy guiding principle. What would it look like in your life if your guiding principle, the thing that guided your decisions, the thing that guided the way you lived out your life, the thing that guided how you interacted with people, what if your guiding principle was reconciliation and wholeness? Boy, we might have a completely different world if we could go by that one guiding principle that God has communicated to us through Jesus. Reconciliation, wholeness. It'd make the world a different place for sure.